Hello, and welcome back to the Over and Back Classic NBA podcast. I am Jason, and with me as usual is Rich. Hello, Rich.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good. Rich, before we begin, this is completely out of nowhere, but I was wondering if you have a nickname.
Yeah, actually, it goes back to the old basketball days. So my nickname is FedEx, which is a little interesting. So when I was playing basketball as a younger kid, I used to play at the same park all the time and like the same gyms all the time, the same YMCA. And there was this like older dude that used to play with us, and he was like this really, he was solid, like your stereotypical like 45 to 50-year-old like YMCA rec baller guy, like old, kind of used some nefarious, you hold your jersey, that sort of stuff, like kind of an old school guy or whatever. Well, after I kept playing, I gained a little reputation with him or whatever. And then one day he just kind of came up and said, you play a lot like the mailman. And I was like, oh yeah, like Carmelo. Yeah, I like Carmelo a lot. Like, and I do a lot of, drop step fadeaways and stuff. Like I liken myself more to Dirk, but he thought it was more Carmelo, which is fine. They have very similar games in some ways, but he said, no, you're faster though. You're like FedEx or something like that. And I was like, all right, cool, whatever. And then like, he just kept calling me FedEx for years and years and years. And it just kind of stuck. So I still go by FedEx. So
you're faster, but you charge more. So.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. Okay.
That actually is probably accurate too.
Yeah. Well, I don't know why. Like something in my head before the show was like Rich, like Killer Craich. Like I just wonder, like with the K name.
Yeah,
I was wondering
cool.
if, like,
no, I never got a cool name. I never got a cool like wrestler name.
Right.
Chair Shot, I guess would be like. There was one time where me and my Voice of Wrestling podcast co-host came up with like a hypothetical show where it was like Chair Shot Radio with what the hell was I forget what it was. It was something like Killer or something like that. So yeah, there's been those, but my legit name is FedEx, and it's still held on to usernames. FedEx227 is was my AOL Instant Messenger name, but of course that is no more. So don't message me on that anymore. And then I have an email address that's FedEx227 as well, but I don't email that because I haven't checked it in like 8 years.
All right,
it's filled with spam.
Fair enough. I will avoid that. I'll use your other email addresses. So very good. Yeah,
what is your name, sir?
Well, when I was a kid and I was, big into the wrestling and like had like, characters and stuff, I would always be Jumpin' Jason Man was my.
I love it. That's good.
Yeah.
Nice.
Nothing really fancy. Yeah. I never really like.
Were you an athletic wrestler or what?
Oh, no. I was very much the opposite of athletic.
So was it supposed to be ironic or it just kind of happened? It was just like, let's jump at Jason Man. And it's like, oh, he does punch and do headlocks. It's like, well, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. It was ambitious, I think, more than anything. But, but yeah, so I was, I imagined myself as a wrestler who would jump off the top rope and, do drop kicks and, be a fancy guy. But yeah, it didn't, wasn't really ever going to happen.
Every time I created a wrestler in like those WrestleMania 2000s, my guy would have so many like flipping moves and stuff. He'd have like the Sasuke special and do the Phoenix Splash and it was incredible. Yeah, I just gave him all the sweet Japanese jumping, diving moves and stuff too. So
yes, well there you go. Yeah, the only other things are some of my family calls me Jay instead of Jason. But that never. That's never really stuck. Otherwise, I don't really have a strong preference, but pretty much everyone else calls me Jason. And I do ironically sometimes give myself the nickname of J-Force just because I think it's like a fun, like,
nice.
Goofball nickname. So that I try to use ironically sometimes. But even though I know it breaks the don't give yourself a nickname rule, but I feel like if I'm doing it ironically, it's okay. But maybe it's like
exactly. No, it's absolutely okay. Yeah, if as long as you're not like owning that nickname, you can absolutely give it to you. You can also call me Richie if you'd like as well, because that's what I had to be called as a kid. Because my dad's name is Rich as well. I'm the third, so I had to be Richie. So yeah, but don't call me Richie.
I will not. I will not.
You could, but let's not. Let's just not.
I use JForce occasionally for video game logins, but that's about it. So
this is good. This is a delightful discussion. So that's it. I think we're done, right? I don't.
Yeah,
that was a topic for today. So
and you might
Twitter.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Over back. Yeah. Twitter and Facebook and, rate us and iTunes, all that good stuff. Yeah,
we're doing some micro episodes now. So this little 4-minute shot here and there.
Yeah.
In and out, boom, boom.
Sure.
Go home.
Yeah. We don't even need to talk about the NBA in it, so.
Yeah. I talked about Karl Malone briefly. So
that's true. That's a good point. Yeah. I've never really thought about Karl Malone and Dirk Nowitzki being similar, but in like a lot of ways, like, Dirk is, Karl Malone, not as good of a rebounder, but he had the 3-point shot, obviously.
Which is kind of me.
Probably would add. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So,
I used to be a good rebounder, but I was also like 6 foot in 7th grade. So at that time, I'd grab like 40 rebounds a game. Like I was a monster. And guess what? I'm still 6 foot. So I am not as good of a rebounder as I once was in 6th and 7th.
You're more like Reggie Evans,
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I used to be.
Yeah.
And then, Because I love him. I love Rodman growing up too, and he was always like my guy.
Sure.
You know, I had to be Mr.
Sure.
Anti-Jordan. You know, and I still am.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways. So
absolutely.
I had to pick Rodman and Pippen, but Rodman was always my guy. And I was like, oh, the rebounds, that's important. Rebounds are important, and you know, and I was that for a while, and then I never grew anymore. So now I just play like shooting guard, point guard because I'm still 6 foot. So
So, you know, you might be thinking that this is leading into a discussion about NBA nicknames, but it's not actually. We're instead going to talk about what I think is a pretty fascinating topic. It is players who played on the most teams in one season. So one player has the record all by himself, which we'll get into very shortly. There are a handful of players who played for 4 teams in one season, and then there are quite a few players who played in 3 teams in one season. And we're going to talk about a handful who played for 15 games or more for each of those teams, so had relatively substantial presence on all 3 of the teams they played for. I mean, obviously. It's weird to have to, one of the things we probably don't appreciate quite enough in a professional athlete side is just like how much they have to, obviously the travel just in season of going from city to city, but having to, if you get traded, you have to change your home. If you're, on a 10-day contract and, not really sure where your place is in the league or trying to stick on with the team, that's a lot of anxiety in your job situation. So that certainly plays a part. And there's a lot of, I think we focus mostly on the good or great players or good or great things. We talk about the obscure stuff as well, but this one's for the journeyman, I guess, for at least for the most part.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to clarify, you're what we're looking at here is guys that have played in one individual season, because there's obviously another, and it might be another show for a later date, is like most franchises played for, like guys that have played for. One of these guys that we're going to talk about actually does have, or he's tied for the top, so we'll talk about him a little bit later. But as far as like a current guy, I was kind of digging in a little bit to try to see if there was any current guys that could be on the show topic we're doing today. I couldn't find any that were more than like 2 or really, but Ish Smith is a guy who's got 10 teams right now, so he's an interesting one. He's at Detroit right now to see where he ends up going. But yeah, I mean that's kind of a fun thing to look at. Most franchises played for in their career, but for the purposes of this, and it's pretty remarkable. Like the top all time is like 12 for most franchises played for. We're gonna go over some guys here, and you'll see that like some of these guys got nearly that in an entire season. But it's pretty interesting to look at 2 of those, and that might be a fun show. At some point as well, to kind of look at guys that have had the most franchises. But like I said, one of the guys, little teaser, we'll talk about a little bit later.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're leading off with Bobby Jones, not the Bobby Jones that you're probably thinking of, but a different Bobby Jones in the 2008 season, played for 5 different teams.
Yeah, this is, of course, not that Bobby Jones, as mentioned. This is he was the 2006 second-round pick of the Wolves. He was from the University of Washington. Played 45 games his rookie years with the Sixers. He came over in a trade for a 2007 second-round pick. Doesn't really matter. But so had a pretty good, solid, stable, landing spot there with the Sixers. Just before the beginning of the 2008 season, he was sent to the Denver Nuggets, along with Stephen Hunter, for Reggie Evans, the aforementioned Reggie Evans, see, full circle here, and Ricky Sanchez. Sanchez, just quick aside, of course, for Sixers fans are probably aware of the Rights to Ricky Sanchez podcast, or NBA fans probably are as well. It's a pretty fun podcast. But the Ricky Sanchez meme or whatever is kind of fun because his rights were traded 4 times. So 4 times teams acquired the rights to Ricky Sanchez, and he never once played in the NBA. And here's kind of some of the players that have been traded for Ricky Sanchez over the years. Linus Lisa, Jarrett Jack, Reggie Evans, Stephen Hunter, Bobby Jones, Sam Young, and Dexter Pittman, all guys that have been traded back and forth for the rights to Ricky Sanchez. And Ricky Sanchez has never played in the NBA, and I do not believe will ever find his way to NBA. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. But as far as this Bobby, though, he played for 6 franchises in 2007, 2006, waived by Denver in January, signed a 10-day contract with Memphis, signed a 10-day with Houston, signed a 10-day with Miami, signed a 10-day with the Spurs, then went back to Denver at the end of the year, played 2 more games there. So 23 games with Denver initially, 9 with Memphis, 4 with Houston, 6 with Miami, 3 with the Spurs, and 2 more with Denver. What's pretty interesting, though, is he didn't play like horrible. Like, he was an okay player. His best game I found was January 18, 2000. He was with Memphis. It was one of his first few games with Memphis. He had 20 points, 13 rebounds, 7 assists. They had a 24-point win over Seattle, so you could pretty much safely assume that they kind of put him in garbage time or whatever. But it wasn't like he was an unproductive player. It just seemed like he couldn't quite, find his foothold. And we talked about this season where, obviously plays for 5 different teams, 6 different franchises. But or six round, yeah, but 2008, 2009 was pretty busy for him as well. So in July he was traded from Denver, so he's with Denver at the end of the prior season. Traded from Denver to New York for Rolando Balkman, the always level Rolando Balkman. He was waived a day later in August. He was claimed by Miami, so he's back on Miami. He was there last year, but was released 10 days later. Effectively ending his NBA career. He never played again. He bounced around the D League a little bit, did a little stuff in Europe. But interestingly enough, and I completely missed this, and I'm kind of interested in seeking out. In 2016, he released a documentary called Basketball Jones: The Overseas Journey, and it was profiling his career playing in Europe. Right now, he's currently playing for the Italian Series A2 team. I'm not even going to pronounce it. It's second-tier Italian. Was it UC per Stalengo? Let's go with that. Yep, he's still playing in Italy. There we go.
You did try to pronounce it. There you go.
Yeah. Having been to Italy this year,
the ambition.
Yeah, I should try. But I'm pretty interested in seeing that. I didn't know that existed, but I'm pretty. Apparently, he's just kind of like, this is what it's like, to play and be a foreign player in Italy, playing in the EuroLeague, and kind of his travels or whatever. So I'm kind of interested in checking that out. But and he definitely owns it, that he is that guy that's on the pedestal of 5 teams in one season. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. So yes, he's the only one who manages to be for 5 teams in one season. As you mentioned, 6 stops twice with Denver. There, you can almost count it as 6 different 6 franchises, even though it was twice with one team. But anyway, no one else has done it more than 4 times. But remarkably, someone has done it 4 times twice. Steve Chubin, he a University of Rhode Island legend. In 1968-69, he played 17 games for the Stars, 8 games for the Minnesota Pipers, who had moved from Pittsburgh the year before, after they'd been champions. The Stars had moved from Anaheim already. Then 24 games with the Pacers, and 28 games with the New York Nets. So basically he and then the next season, he'd start with the Nets for 11 games, and then 14 games with the Pipers, who are now in Pittsburgh, 32 more games with the Pacers, and 15 games with the Kentucky Colonels. So some highlights of that and what he was known for. He was University of Rhode Island legend, led them to the NCAA tournament in 1966, then was a 3rd-round pick of the Warriors, and he actually he didn't make it to the NBA. He'd said he went to the Italian League, which was probably the number 2 league in the world at the time, and he took Bill Bradley's spot on Olympia Milano. And just as an aside, I had somehow missed this, but he was recently a guest of our friend Rainis Lattis' podcast, The Handle, I believe in October. So,
oh damn, I should have listened before. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I will. I just noticed that when I was researching his name, and I somehow had completely missed that. So we'll have to check out that episode. Recommend everyone here. Of course, his episodes are always great, so I'm sure it's terrific. And then after the time in Italy, went to the United States. And had 6 different franchises in those 8 stops in 2 seasons, and actually did play pretty well in his rookie year. Before the 69 season, where things went crazy, just with the Anaheim Amigos, scored 18.2 points per game. His best game actually was scored 40 points in a Stars loss to the Oakland Oaks. He was in double figures for 10 of his 17 games as a member of the Stars in that first season. Failed to score double digits in 8 games with Minneapolis, then double figures in 19 to 24 games with Indianapolis, and then double figures in 17 to 28 games with New York. So, it was a little bit up and down, very inconsistent, letting it up some days and barely scoring another. And another friend of the show, Mark Monteith, had a one-on-one interview with Chubin. Talks about kind of the odd circumstances behind his arrival and his departure. Talked about how, under the early days of, when Slick Leonard had taken over and they were trying to, figure out exactly how to get all those pieces together, as they, were pretty good already, but had sort of underachieved and, worked his way into the starting lineup. He had a pretty aggressive style of play, and then suddenly he was traded for Ron Perry, who is going to be mentioned here a little bit. And actually, it kind of upset him. Sort of felt like a mystery to him because he felt like he was fitting in. But Perry was a good 3-point shooter and was sort of known for kind of feeling neat. Another thing that he was also known for his late night exploits, which probably probably were a reason why maybe he didn't stick on with the team.
particularly Indiana. They were well known at the time too for enjoying their nights.
They did. Yeah.
So yeah, that could have been a factor. I don't know if that was the factor, but
right.
It was in a few articles, it was mentioned that like teams were kind of like, not necessarily on board with that. I mean, if you're going to be Wilt and show up, whenever you want, that's one thing. But if you're going to be, Chubin, it might be another thing because he's a good scorer and good everything. But yeah, you look at that and it is kind of weird. But yeah, that was one of the factors that was possibly brought up, is that he was a man who enjoyed his nights a lot and his mornings.
Yes. And it's not like he was alone in the NBA or in the ABA or in professional basketball history. And that certainly that's maybe it was to an extreme point, which didn't keep him around, but alas. So speaking of Ron Perry, he happened to do it 3 times in the 68-69 season as well. This happened by far the heaviest period in which this happened was either at the beginning or the end of the ABA. So Perry began with the Floridians for 24 games, the New York Americans for 23 games, and the Pacers for 27 games. As we mentioned, traded for Steve Chubin. He was drafted by the Bullets, but then toured with Europe with the Industrial All-Star team instead. And he played, was actually when he went to the ABA, he was 5th in 3-pointers in his in both his first and second season, and top 10 in 3-point percentage. And there's a couple articles, one from 91 where he's giving basketball clinics to kids. And then I believe that one was in Virginia. And there's another one from 2004 in Florida where he was known as the shot doctor, and he had tutored and coached future NBA star Steve Blake. So he made a difference in Steve Blake's life. So fun connection there.
Yeah, so our next guy, so that was just a brief aside for Ron Perry. We didn't feel like going back to Ron Perry, even though he's a 3, but we're going to go back to the 4s here. We got Ken Wilburn. This is in the 1970 season. Interesting. He starts 4 games with the Bulls. And then he moves over to the ABA. So he's got 4 games with the Bulls. Screw that. I'm going to the ABA. Then he has 4 games with the New York Nets, 37 games with the Denver Rockets, and then 6 games with the Minnesota Pipers. Then he's out of the league. A little bit stuff with him. Obviously, brief stint in the NBA. Very, very brief before spending a couple years in the ABA. Had a long run in the CBA, though, in the 1970s. A 2-time MVP in that league. So ended up having a pretty good career there. We really couldn't find much about him. We did find an obit that says he died in 2016, but he is still listed as alive on his Wikipedia page. So it could just be a thing where nobody, really wants to take the mantle of updating Ken Wilburn's Wikipedia. But obit says he's dead. Wikipedia says he's alive, so we're not quite sure because Wikipedia is never wrong. So
it was a listing in like a I don't know, some sort of like a listserv that has obituaries on it. So it was a little bit strange, but anyway, it was definitely it was said Ken Wilburn who played in the NBA. So
okay, so it absolutely was him. So he's confirmed.
Well, I mean, can assuming it's accurate, which it wasn't like on like a funeral home website. It wasn't like the traditional place you would find it. It was a little bit.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
It was just some online listing, like some weird Google like obituaries. Like I'm trying to think of the term, like in the like old like listserv type things. Like so like Usenet, a Usenet type thing. So that's the only reason I question like maybe, but so we're not trying to
don't update the page yet. Don't update the page yet. Try to find out if you're going to be the person that wants.
We're teaching the mystery here, I guess, and not giving you the answer. So, yes. So we got old Rich Johnson here, or I guess Dick Johnson, depending on how he was known, which is fun. You don't get that name too often, do you? Of course, there were. I listened to like a Shining podcast that goes through The Shining like every like 2 minutes and 37 seconds, and they were talking about like when it stopped being like acceptable to give men the nickname of Dick. Like Richards become Dicks, like that at some point stopped, and whether it was just the fact that what Dick means, or whether it was a Richard Nixon thing, or when it happened and why.
I never thought of the Richard Nixon possibility there too. I mean, obviously, that's interesting. I never thought of that he could possibly have contributed to it a little bit, where people were like, we don't want to really be. But I don't know. My dad said when he grew up, he had to be Dickie sometimes because his dad was rich, because I said I'm the third, so I had to be Richie. I mean, obviously, thankfully, I wasn't Dickie, but there was a time where like his old relatives would call him Dickie when they'd show up or whatever. But he was in 1950, it probably was a little bit more acceptable.
It wasn't like as big of a deal. I don't know when that became, if that was a popular vulgarity in the 50s, or if just everyone just kind of forgot it. Just like I don't know. We're able to separate that better, but
that's for another podcast. That's for the.
I guess it is.
Not one of ours. Someone else's podcast. I'm sure there's one on there.
Not one of ours. Anyway, Richard Dick, however he wants to be known as, won a title in his first year in the league with the Celtics in the 69 season. And then in 71, he played only one game with the Celtics before jumping ship to the ABA, had 7 games with the Floridians, 25 games with the Carolina Cougars, and 6 with Pittsburgh, who are now the Condors, before calling it quits. And yes, he scored 8 points, by the way, in that game against the Celtics. Couldn't really figure out why he left Boston, but for the ABA, presumably just it probably wasn't his decision, I'm guessing. But maybe, I don't know, maybe he was wooed by the big money for the ABA.
It could have been money. Yeah, it's hard to tell. I mean, there's going to be a lot of those we're going to talk about where it's like guy plays a little bit in the NBA and then goes to the ABA, and it could just be a thing where ABA guys are trying to fill out a roster. You're at the end of an NBA bench, you get promised some stuff in the. I mean, I get it. Like they were competitive, and that's what the ABA wanted to do. They wanted to kind of shake it up a little. So it's just interesting to see guys that play like one game with Boston, like, screw this, I'm out.
Yeah,
like, bye.
That's for college players, for bigger guys, for a Dick Johnson going. That seems. So next we got Rod Higgins. I think you should take this one. I feel like Rod Higgins is in your wheelhouse.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I love me some Rod Higgins. But he's probably more famous for his run as a member of NBA front offices in the 2000s. He just a little bit of background on that, and then we'll get to his playing career. Started as an assistant with Golden State when his career was done. Became assistant GM of the Wizards, I believe under the Jordan regime when Jordan was there. Joined the Warriors front office in 2005. Then was GM of the Charlotte Bobcats / Hornets. We're gonna I think we should now agree totally just to never ever mention the Bobcats ever again, because like they don't, nobody. I think it's just easier to call it Charlotte Hornets. So he was the GM of the Charlotte Hornets in 2007.
Yeah, I'm totally. I believe that forgetting about the Charlotte Bobcats is in over and back policy already. So
okay, so let's just never let this be the last time we ever say the name Bobcats unless we're making fun of them. So there we go. So he was GM of the Charlotte Hornets in 2007. Moved up to the office of president when Rich Cho was hired in 2011, and then he stepped down in June of 2014.
All right, I'm sorry, I need to interrupt you. So if we're going to refer to the Charlotte Hornets in 2007, do we need to refer to them as the New Orleans Pelicans, or like?
I don't know.
Because they're the New Orleans Hornets, and the New Orleans Hornets actually had years in which they were good and important, So that creates an issue.
What do we do, Baron Davis? Let's just say there were 2 Hornets. For some reason, the NBA decided they could not have enough nicknames, so they both decided to be Hornets. Like, hey, what are you going to name your team? The Hornets. Like, I already got one. Like, we want to be with the Hornets too. All right, whatever.
That's actually going to a similar issue is going to be raised later in this podcast. So we'll so stay tuned for that. So.
But as far as his playing days, Higgins had a somewhat stable career, aside from the bizarre 1985-86 season we're going to talk about here. He was the second-round pick of the Bulls in 1982. Solid few years in Chicago, and then he was waived at the beginning of the 1985 season. He signed with Seattle, played 12 games there. He was waived in December. Signed by the Spurs in January, played 11 games there. Was signed by the Nets in February, played 2 games there, and then was back with the Bulls in March. Played 5 games, but was waived 13 days later. So it's a really weird year because he had a lot of stability. And then what's interesting is that he had stability after this year for the most part as well. He finally found a home in Golden State in 1986 and played well enough. I mean, too, he averaged 15.5 points per game in 88, 10.6 in 89, and 11.1 in 1990. He bounced around a little bit in the back half of his career, then finally retired with the Warriors in 1995. But yeah, just a very odd year where he just bounced a lot. And it's not really typical to what else he did in his career. And he had a good career before and after. So pretty interesting there. But yeah, probably more famous for his GM roles, but had some few solid years in the NBA as well.
Yeah, it seems like he would have been useful for that Bulls team, kind of going down the stretch, because they were making their run for the playoffs. I'm not sure on the timing of whether Jordan was back for the injury yet, or if what that dynamic was like. But that's interesting that he didn't stick really in any of those spots. But particularly with Chicago's needs, I would imagine he would have been useful at that point. But.
Maybe Jordan hated him. But no, they liked him. Jordan, I guess, liked him because he hired him later. So maybe,
sometimes he hired guys later they hated at the time. So it's Jordan.
That is not one. He is not one to do. That's true. You are correct.
He likes to keep his enemies close sometimes. So, So next we have Tony Massenburg, who, as you hinted at earlier, he shares the NBA record with Chucky Brown, Joe Smith, and Jim Jackson as playing with 12 different teams over the course of his career. I don't have the notes in front of me, but several of those guys were traded with each other. Although I believe one of them was not traded for any of the others. So I'll see if I can dig that up at some point. Probably not in time for this show, but perhaps another time. But anyway, for the 92 season, he played with 4 teams. He played one game with the Spurs, 3 games with the Hornets, but they can safely call them the Hornets because it was 92. 7 games with the Celtics and 7 games with the Warriors. Was waived by the Spurs in November, signed with the Hornets waived a month later, then had 10 days with both Boston and Golden State. After this season in which he played, of course, only 18 games and 90 minutes with 4 different teams, amazingly brief there. He moved on to Spain, where his team won multiple championships. So he did well there, then returned to the NBA to a pretty solid career overall. He had about 10 points a game or so until 2000, and even stuck around long enough to win a title with the 2005 Spurs. So he has a ring. Tony Massenburg's ring. How many of us can have a ring?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So when you get in arguments with your friends about who's better, Tony Massenburg or player X, you can bring up the ring. I mean, Massenburg's got the jewelry. So yeah, no, I mean,
yes, a lot of
better than Karl Malone. I mean, come on. I mean, one's got a ring and one doesn't. So.
It makes sense. Yeah. I don't know. Would we call him like UPS?
Yeah, exactly. Massenburg. Like, what's the slowest? Possible. Slowest non-Pony Express way to get to mail. So I don't know.
There you go.
Tony Massenburg. Yeah, interesting guy. He bounced around a lot. At the beginning of his career, he just never could really kind of find his footing. And if you look at early parts of his, it wasn't much. And then he comes back and has a solid year after Spain. So I don't know if he just kind of figured it out or if there were some other issues going on with him. But ended up having a pretty solid career otherwise. I mean, a lot of these guys we're going to talk about, I think he's among one of the better players, and among the guys that hung around for the longest. So interesting enough for him.
Yeah. So next we have Alex Stivrins.
Stivrins. All right. Alex Stivrins, 1993, we're going to talk about here. Played with Phoenix, the Clippers, Milwaukee, and Atlanta this year. A little bit of background on him. 4th round pick of Seattle in 1985. 2 picks before Arvydas Sabonis. Same round as Spud Webb as well. I miss the old days of the multiple rounds because there's some gems in those late rounds. We'll talk about another guy later. I mean, I'll talk about him right now. Second to last pick in this draft in the 7th round, Mario Elie. Pretty good. He had more win shares than all the 10 guys in this draft. I mean, not bad. I mean, if you didn't have 19 rounds, how are you going to pick Mario Elie? But no,
plus you got the kiss moment. The kiss
exactly right. Yeah, our iconic moments that would be gone, lost to history if not for the obnoxious rounds. And then how can you draft Carl Lewis and Bo Jackson unless you have that's what I missed most of guys drafting Olympians and being like maybe they'll come.
Maybe
Michael Phelps will play for us. No, okay, all right, he's not good at basketball. I don't play basketball, guys. All right,
I believe that because that was Arvydas Sabonis actually was originally drafted by the Hawks, and then that ended up being the legal pick for whatever reason. Was eligible, and then the next year, or I believe it was the next year, that he was drafted by the Blazers, and the Blazers got him 10 years later. So
exactly, yeah. So it didn't pay off. I mean, the 2 picks before, though I don't know. I think they got a little. Maybe the Blazers did make the better of that pick, in the next 10 years because old Alex did not do too much after playing only 3 games with Seattle Spider, which is his nickname apparently. I don't know. I don't know why. It just says that on his basketball reference. He is Spider. We're gonna go with it. He went to Europe and played with France, Italy, and then made a brief stop in the CBA. So that's after his first, obviously, 4th round pick of Seattle. Plays 3 games, then goes over to Europe. Returns to the NBA in 1993, where he played, of course, as I mentioned, 4 teams in a season: Phoenix, the Clippers, Milwaukee, and Atlanta. So that's old Alex Stivrins.
Good old Alex Stivrins. So now we're down to the 3 teams in one season. As we mentioned, it's a minimum of 15 games per team. This is a much longer list if we include fewer games, so we don't want to do that, obviously. You can we'll show you a link where you can get a pretty current version of the list, at least to 2012. So you might miss a few more recent ones, but close enough. So first we got Don Boven in the 1953 season. This is kind of the other time period in which this happened a lot, to the early days of the NBA, when there's a lot of contraction of franchises and there's just a lot of instability. That obviously this maximizes during this time. Don Boven was actually so he played for the Milwaukee Hawks for 27 games, the Baltimore Bullets, the original Baltimore Bullets, for 23 games. They would fold in another season or 2, and then the Fort Wayne Pistons for 17 games. So Yes. So he was traded twice. There actually were no teams that folded during this season. A couple teams would fold over the next 2 years, though. Some fun Don Boven facts, because we're always
always the home of fun Don Boven facts.
Yeah.
Is the podcast, of course.
Of course, yeah. So he began his career in 1949. I said I put NBA career here, but technically BAA career here with the Waterloo Hawks, and not to be confused with the current Hawks franchises, because they were actually at the time the Tri-Cities Blackhawks.
Oh, come on, call us the different names, guys. Come on, pick a Hornet. Yeah. Hornets is available, guys.
There you go. So the following season, the Waterloo franchises left the NBA to join a completely different league called the National Professional Basketball League, which only lasted for a season and not really even that. But he led the league in scoring and was on the All-Star team. More than half the league's teams folded, and then no championship was played. Both the Waterloo Hawks and the Sheboygan Redskins claimed to be the champions, but the league was dissolved before they could actually play a game to just determine who the champions was. So we are never going to know who the National Professional Basketball League champions were. I'm going to go ahead and go with the Hawks because they have the non-racist team name. So
yeah, that'll help. But I was in Sheboygan this last year, and I might be this year again. So I'll ask around. I'll get my ear to the ground and see what they think, the locals think about the Redskins National Professional Basketball League championship, and so see if they claim to it. Maybe if there's a banner up in City Hall or something, I'll see what I can do. I'll be on the case for sure.
All right, yeah. So I appreciate that. Yes. So then he went back to the NBA and signed with the Milwaukee Hawks, who actually are the current Hawks. Okay. So they'd since moved from the Tri-Cities and lost the black part. So, and he managed to set an NBA record by fouling out of 6 consecutive games. So fun times. It apparently is still a record. So, and he passed away in 2011. So, anyway, those are your fun Don Boven facts.
There it is. Yes, of course, you're home. So now we'll move on to Reggie Johnson here in 1982. Plays 21 games with the Spurs, 23 games with Cleveland, and then 31 with the Kansas City Kings. What's most interesting about Reggie this year, though, is that he played pretty well in all these stops. Some of these guys, we talked about before, 10 days or back of the roster guys bouncing around, but Reggie really isn't. He is just kind of the byproduct of some trades. I mean, he scores 10 plus points per game his rookie year with the Spurs. And this year, the 1982, he's traded in December with Ron Brewer for Mike Mitchell and Roger Fagley. In February, the Cavaliers traded him to the Kansas City for Cliff Robinson. No, not that Cliff Robinson, but the other Cliff Robinson was actually a pretty good scorer in his time in the NBA. He doesn't get a lot of love as far as the Cliff Robinson thing. And I also don't think this one vanity searched and got mad at us on Twitter, but I could be wrong. I don't know if this Cliff Robinson ever got mad at us on Twitter, but I do know a Cliff Robinson got mad at us on Twitter. So, but I cannot confirm which one it is. I have a strong suspicion it's the one. But no, the next season, though, sold by Kansas City to Philly. He'd win a ring that year, and then the next year we traded by Philly to the Nets for Eddie Phillips. That year in Philly, the next year he played 1 minute in the opening game of the NBA Finals. He didn't score, but hey, that's pretty cool. I mean, played more times in the NBA Finals than you or I did, so
that's true.
But not more than Tony Massenburg, I think. I don't know. I didn't look at Tony Massenburg's game logs, but and I don't care to. I mean, I'm just gonna assume that Tony didn't play much. Well,
go ahead. That's a fair assumption. Yeah. So, next we have a fairly big name here in Sam Cassell in the 97 season. He played for 22 games with the Suns, 16 games with the Mavericks, and 23 games with the Nets. So, had a weird transition. Obviously, he was, early in his career was a big part in the Rockets' 2 title seasons. But was part of the trade by the Rockets to the Suns for Charles Barkley, Robert Horry, who also had kind of a weird transition before he went to the Lakers. Chucky Brown and Mark Bryant also involved in the trade. He clashed with Cotton Fitzsimmons, the Suns coach, and then found he found better rapport with Danny Ainge once he took over as coach of the Suns. Robert Horry cannot say the same thing as for Danny Ainge with throwing the towel in his face, which is a beautiful moment in NBA history. 22 games in this 97 season. He went to the Mavericks along with Michael Finley and AC Green for Jason Kidd, Tony Dumas, and Lauren Meyer. And that was not although that trade was done by basically like the Mavericks for a year had like a total non-basketball person as like their GM and pre Don Nelson. So that trade was not good, but it could have ended up a lot worse. And then, yes, after 16 games with the Mavericks, went with Chris Gatling, Jim Jackson, George McLeod, and Eric Montross to the Nets for Sean Bradley, Ed O'Bannon, Robert Pack, and Khalid Reeves. That actually was a worse trade for the Mavericks in terms of what they were not getting anything back for, a couple of good players there. So, yes. So interesting deal there. Yes. Sam Smith, of course, past guest, headline of an article about this trade, Mavericks Nets trade, never have so many meant so little. So
I love that. That's great. I mean, so, there's like a lot of just like, hey, you take that. And I miss these trades. These trades don't happen anymore. Like hey, we got like 4 guys that are okay. Do you want our 4 guys that are okay? Like, yeah, let's see what happens. Like,
yes.
It's pretty good. Like,
yeah, and Sam, Cassell actually was meaningful for the Nets, and of course, had a good late run in his career with the Bucks and the Timberwolves and Clippers as well. So, actually, I believe Sam, history proved him wrong on that one.
Yeah,
probably not for the reasons he would have thought. But
no, not absolutely. I think he was more looking at like Sean Bradley and Jim Jackson and those sort of guys. Right. But yeah, that's like a who's who of '90s NBA right there. Ed O'Bannon, Sean Bradley, Jim Jackson, George
Reeves,
Robert Pack. Like that's an all. That's a fun. Great little trade there. But the good old days. That's
Too bad we didn't start NBA 20 years ago, like a year earlier. We would have gotten that one in. But
exactly, yeah. Alas,
that's
fine. There's still some. There's some nutso trades in the 1997-98 season.
Oh yeah,
that's fine.
Pretty fun, yeah. All right, so now so as I sort of alluded to before, a lot of these happened. The next one, they're all going to happen in the ABA, and either right at the beginning or when the league, of course, was especially wacky, or in the last season when teams were kind of folding left or right. So. You want to take Barry Liebowitz?
Yes, this is Barry Liebowitz. He played 1 year in the ABA, 1967-68, and bounced around quite a lot. 23 games with the Pittsburgh Pipers, 24 games with the Nets, and 35 games with the Oaks that year. So after bouncing around the ABA that year, Liebowitz played professionally in Israel for Hapoel Tel Aviv. I played from 1968 until 1982. Barry Liebowitz, long career there. He was the captain of the Israeli national team that won the silver medal at Eurobasket in 1979, and also participated in the 73, 75, 77, and 81 championships. So he had a really good European career. Not much in America, not much in the ABA, but Barry Liebowitz. There you go.
There you go. And now we got Manny Leaks, I think, who's talked about a little bit in Loose Balls. He had in the 69 season, he had 31 games with the Colonels, 20 games with the Nets, and then 27 games with the Dallas Chaparrals, now the Spurs. And yeah, he was picked by the Pistons in the 68 draft, but went to the ABA instead. He was the 20th pick. I guess that would be second round. He bounced around, even beyond 69. He also bounced. He had 2 teams in the 71 season and 3 teams in the 72 season, although not the minimum 15 games. He played well actually with the Chaparrals, 18.8 points in 1970. But yeah, it's just gonna happen. Unfortunately for Manny Leaks, just didn't never quite worked out. But yeah, actually, for his numbers, despite playing with so many teams, he had 13.5 points per game and 9.9 rebounds per game. Like he was totally, at least numbers wise, productive player. But yeah, it just didn't, for whatever reason, did not find much stability or longevity.
Yeah, and that's kind of the representation of the ABA, and you see that a lot with these players, where it's just like, why were these guys traded? And we don't know. I mean, we don't know a lot of the background, obviously, because the ABA is just not something that's recorded all that well. But a lot of times, it's teams need to make payroll, so they trade a guy, and they get $2,000 back, because you just see these guys, and it's like, and Manny Leaks is one of those guys. You look at what he's doing, you're like, he's productive, he's doing good stuff, and then he just gets bounced around, and it could be just teams thinking that this guy's going to help them win this game and all that stuff. But it's just a wild league. There's just no stability there, and yeah, it just had to be just crazy to try to play in that league too, and just and you hear about it in Loose Balls too, where guys are just constantly getting traded and moved and all that sort of stuff. It's just a wacky league, but we love it so much. So
yeah, I'm sorry, he did actually play a couple years in the NBA afterward. He had a salary dispute with the Floridians, and then went to and then played with the Sixers and the Bullets in 73 and 74. So he did. I didn't want to forget that he actually did play a little bit in the NBA as well.
Cool. So then we'll move on to Tom Owens. This is 1975-76 for him. 19 games with Kentucky, 16 games with Indianapolis, and 39 games with the Spurs. A little bit of background here. He bounced around early in his professional career with the ABA. 2 teams in 1972, 2 in 1975. Then, of course, the 3 teams, as we mentioned, in 1976. Finally reached the NBA in 1977. A little bit of interesting, though. You might know the name, you might not know the name, but he's a pretty important figure in NBA history. After the 1981 season, the Blazers traded him to the Pacers, and the Pacers got and the Blazers got the Pacers 1984 draft pick in return. Owens was later traded to the Pistons after the season. He retired a year later. All right, we're done with Tom Owens. We don't really care about him. But the 1984 draft pick, interesting enough, you're like, that's a pretty good draft. Well, 4 years after that draft, or after that trade, rather, the Pacers finished with the worst record in the Eastern Conference. However, because of the trade, the Pacers were left with bystanders in that draft. The Blazers, though, they had a pick in 1984. And, of course, there was some good players in there. Michael Jordan, Sam Bowie, Hakeem Olajuwon, Sam Perkins, Charles Barkley, John Stockton. And, of course, the pick acquired from Indiana for Tom Owens turned out to be the one that the Blazers used to select Sam Bowie. So thanks a lot, Tom Owens. So Portland blame Tom Owens. It's his fault because he was just so enticing that they had to get. But no, I mean, Portland made a hell of a deal there. And Indiana, I mean, you look into them and it's a terrible deal for them because, Tom did nothing for them and they gave up the pick and didn't know what they were going to be in the future. So the Blazers got a good one. And hey, Sam Bowie at the time, whatever, we're not going to revisit history, but not a solid pick at the time and not for injury. Sam would have been fine. But, obviously.
Yeah. And Tom Owens is documented quite a bit, of course, in Breaks of the Game, because he's the Blazer center after one of the Blazer centers after Bill Walton and, trying to, of course, live up to that. And he talks about a little bit about his life and his career. I mean, he's not mentioned a lot in the book, but they don't dig into him too much, but he definitely is in there. And actually, and this is not necessarily this probably is not an endorsement of win shares, but he has the most win shares of any Blazers center in any single season. At least I checked this a couple years ago. So he has the most win shares of any, including Walton.
Portland Trailblazers fans are going to be very upset by that. Yeah, that's
so.
Is that an indictment of Blazers history or a benefit to Mr. Tom Owens? No, but Tom Owens had a solid few years. I mean,
he was fine. Yeah. So it's more like he just played Walton was never fully healthy for a season, and he was. So he managed to get more by with an asterisk, but still, he was a fairly productive player, for at least for a little while. So, but good for Tom Owens.
Yeah.
And interesting that in that ABA year, that the 76 season, actually none of those teams folded that year. A lot of these were responsible, because the Stars folded very early in the season, and the Conquistadors, or they were the Sales, I think, by then. But San Diego franchise folded. I think another team, the Baltimore Claws folded even before the season, and so that inspired a lot of this, but actually had nothing to do with Tom Owens, although it did have to do with Jim Eakins, our final guy in this list in the 76 season. 16 games for the Utah Stars, 23 games for the Virginia Squires, and 34 games for the Nets. And actually, he was one of the few stable forces for the Squires franchise before they were the Oakland Oaks and they were the Washington Caps, and then settled in to be the Squires for 5 or 6 seasons. They barely survived the end of the ABA. Things were very hairy for them in that final season, but actually was number 1 in win shares in franchise history by a good margin. In 74, he got traded to Utah. He played a full season there before the 76 season. He actually was an all-star, I believe, in his final year with the Squires, and ended up here in a fairly good situation on a Nets title team with his old teammate Julius Erving. So won a championship. It was kind of an odd trade because it was traded for Sven Nader, who had been rookie of the year previously, but had really slumped. I think was dealing with some injuries. So they brought Eakins in, who was older, more of a pro, kind of a better fit with the Nets, who had sort of upheaved their roster, and ended up working out for them. Before his NBA career began, he was part of kind of a famous trade. Went to the Kings along with Brian Taylor for and 2 first-round picks, who ended up being Otis Birdsong and Phil Ford for Tiny Archibald. The plan was to team up Tiny Archibald and Julius Erving, but unfortunately they could not afford Julius Erving and had to trade him to the Sixers for cash. And Tiny Archibald got hurt fairly early on in that season with the Nets, and then later was traded to the Braves and suffered an even more serious Achilles injury which he missed the next season. So So yeah, that ended up being really bad for the Nets because they lost out on Birdsong and Phil Ford, who had been really good players, and and basically, we're completely, different from the team that had just won the ABA championship. So
lose 2 picks, lose a good player, and then you lose Julius in a little bit, and then you lose Tiny Archibald in a little bit. Yeah, did not work out for the Nets, but things have long not worked out for the Nets. So I think that's pretty representative of Nets history there. But it was a fun little exercise here. These some fun little players, fun little trips down here, a little jump into the ABA, but some other guys too that are interesting. And Sam Cassell is probably the most. I mentioned Tony Massenburg before as the guy who probably had the better career. I mean, obviously Sam Cassell probably the best career of all those guys. But it's weird the circumstances. Some guys just move around on 10 days. Some guys just get traded for Eric Montross, Jim Jackson, Georgia Cloud, and that's all those guys. So it's definitely pretty interesting there to see how the different ones kind of worked out and why guys bounce around so much. And I wish we had more answers to the ABA stuff, but that is what it is with the ABA. It's always a mystery, and that's kind of the fun of the ABA is trying to guess, what was going on or, why certain things happened. But I'm kind of glad we don't know everything about the ABA. It still makes it a little fun to have these adventures then.
Yeah, and I'm sure again I'm sure the handles Steve Chubin podcast will shed some answers at least on his mystery. So you can imagine whether it was partying or whether it was something else. There'll be some answers there. So go listen to that as well. You listen to other episodes that we've done, which are a lot of them are good. I would say most of them are good.
I would say 70% easy. Easy 70%.
Yeah, I would say 70% of them are good. Yeah, so. Do that. This is 202 now, I believe. So we've got a lot of episodes. Most of them are you can listen to an episode from 2 years and pretty much holds it pretty much holds up in terms of we talk about history a lot, so there's not a lot of not going to be outdated is what I'm getting at there. And yeah, we speak good. We're good at podcasting. You should check us out at the Step Back at fansided.com. There's a lot of great stuff in terms of lots of good writing. Nylan Kalkus is there. Other good podcasts, including Fast Baked Breakfast. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Over and Back NBA. We are on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, pretty much anywhere you listen to your podcasts. If you want to leave us a rating and review on any of those platforms, we would greatly appreciate it. It helps the algorithm get us more popular and, get us that sweet, sweet podcast money, which we're all looking for. Anything else, Rich? I
think that's it. Yeah, I think we got it.
All right. That's super good. All right. Well, this has been fun. We'll hopefully, we won't have to break any, I don't know if you were going to break, podcast records, number of podcasts that we've hosted, between us, we'd have to be up there in terms of, setting records for numbers of podcasts, especially you. Yeah,
we should definitely do a 24-hour day where we try to do the most podcasts in one day.
I'm sure that'll be fun.
We should definitely do that one day. Just do 50, 20 podcasts in one day. I think that's
we'll get every podcast that we'd ever all the different themes. Not all basketball, not all wrestling. Just
exactly. Oh yeah, we can bounce before. We can talk our infamous Dennis Rodman blended wrestling basketball one could come at some point. Too. So that's still waiting for that one. Still excited for that. But that's all right. We'll do it during our 24-hour Twitch stream that we do for. We're not doing that. We're not doing that.
No, I need some sleep. Yeah, I'm very tired. I'm very old, Rich. I know you're still a young person. But
I'm very old these days. So it's coming rapidly. I played basketball earlier today, and I'm very sore, and I'm probably going to go to bed at 9. So
all right, then. Well,
FedEx has to do what FedEx has got to do. He's got.